Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into soft wool robes, lighting beeswax candles, and stepping barefoot onto cold stone floors. Because we're spending the night inside a medieval convent. You're surrounded by high cloister walls, the air smells faintly of lavender and damp wood, and the only sound is the quiet creak of sandal soles on worn flagstones. It's a place where talking is not exactly forbidden, but definitely frowned upon. And if you're the chatty type, well, let's just say you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments, where are you watching from tonight, and what time is it there? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake before dawn, long before it actually. The bell tower hasn't even considered ringing yet, but the convent is already humming with quiet motion. Someone is stoking the hearth in the kitchens. Someone else, Sister Anna maybe, is kneeling in the chapel, whispering a prayer into the silence. You, meanwhile, are trying not to trip on your robe as you shuffle down the stone corridor in your bare feet. This is a Cistercian convent, or Benedictine. Honestly, the walls all look the same before sunrise. Either way, you've entered a world shaped by ritual, routine, and reverent hush. No wagging tongues, no gossip behind veils, just whispered psalms, communal chores, and long, contemplative silences. Talking, if it happens at all, must be brief and necessary. And often, if you can help it, not spoken at all. The church didn't exactly require silence for convents, but it was strongly encouraged. Some orders took vows of complete silence. Others had great silence only at night. But across Europe, especially between the 9th and 15th centuries, convents were among the quietest places on earth, rivaled only by certain libraries and maybe the average sheep. For you, the first sign of this vow's power isn't the quiet itself, it's the calm. The way everything moves without chaos, without chatter. Nuns prepare breakfast without speaking. One lifts a copper kettle, another gestures and nods. One raises 2 fingers. The other responds with an odd twist of her wrist and points toward the bread. Somehow, everything flows. And here's your first odd fact of the night. Medieval nuns didn't just rely on intuition. They had a system. Not formalized in the way we think of modern sign language, but a real collection of gestures, refined over decades, sometimes centuries. The earliest mentions of convent sign language appear in the 10th century. A manuscript from Cluny Monastery, okay, technically monks, but the sisters weren't far behind, lists nearly 300 gestures for use during meals and prayers. Things like pass the salt, I need more wine, or please stop humming that Gregorian chant, Sister Agnes. Okay, maybe not that last one, but close. Now, imagine you're a novice, a newcomer. You've taken your first vows and you're ready to embrace the lifestyle. But no one told you how to say anything. You go to the refectory for dinner and realize you have no idea how to ask for the butter. You wave vaguely. The nun next to you frowns, signs a rapid-fire series of gestures involving her palm, her nose, and her spoon. You blink. She sighs and passes the butter anyway. Learning the signs was part of initiation, a secret code, passed from older sisters to younger ones like folklore and family recipes. Different convents had different versions. In one, touching your nose might mean, I'm done eating. In another, it might mean, I've seen a rat in the larder again. Context mattered. It wasn't just about rules. It was about keeping the soul quiet. Medieval thinkers, especially those under the influence of monasticism, believed speech stirred the passions. Words could provoke desire, anger, pride. Silence, meanwhile, brought clarity, peace, and, let's be real, it probably reduced the number of passive-aggressive feuds over blanket storage. Still, this quiet wasn't empty. It was full of motion. Silent meals were choreographed like ballets. You'd sit in the long refectory with its narrow tables and high windows, the only sound being the clink of spoons and the soft rustle of robes. A nun at the head of the table might make a sign, 2 fingers palm down. You glance up, catch the signal, and pass the pitcher of thin ale down the line. No one says a word. No one needs to. And despite what modern movies may imply, nuns weren't joyless husks of obedience. They played, they laughed, quietly. Some even scribbled jokes in the margins of prayer books, little doodles of cats and silly poems about bad cooks and windy outhouses. The sign language wasn't sterile, it was warm, lived in, sometimes cheeky. Take the sign for fart. Yes, it existed, because when you're living off barley stew and cabbage 6 days a week, it becomes relevant. Historians still argue whether the more obscene signs were official or just local improvisations. But let's just say Sister Margaret had a surprisingly versatile hand flick when she thought no one was watching. Over time, these gestures became so embedded in daily convent life that visitors were often left stunned. One bishop, upon visiting a particularly enthusiastic convent in Germany, reportedly asked whether the women were possessed, because surely no group of women could communicate so fluidly without speaking. The Mother Superior smiled, signed a polite response, and ushered him out before he could investigate further. As you settle into your cot that first night, the silence feels less heavy than it did that morning. You hear the soft chirp of crickets outside, the occasional clink of a water jug, the rhythm of quiet breathing in the dark. Someone down the hall lets out a single snore, then stops. You smile, eyes fluttering shut. No one says goodnight. They just sign it. Morning light creeps in through the slats of the wooden shutters, casting pale golden lines across the stone floor. You blink awake to the scent of fresh bread and something that might be boiled onions. You can't tell yet. Breakfast in the convent isn't exactly Michelin star, but it's nourishing, and more importantly, quiet. Today, you're helping in the kitchens. That means slipping into the daily rhythm of the cloister, a rhythm pulsing not with words, but with gestures. You shuffle into the stone-arched space where Sister Althea, who's easily 70 if she's a day, is already tending the fire. She doesn't greet you with a good morning, of course. Instead, she glances up and makes a small motion, 3 fingers tapping her chest, then pointing to a ladle. Right, porridge duty. This is your second full day as a novice, and you're starting to catch on. Yesterday's signs were mostly mealtime basics. Pass, done, more, stop. Today you're leveling up. Stir, scoop, and, most intriguingly, burned. That last one you learn the hard way when you get distracted watching a sparrow land on the windowsill and Sister Althea suddenly waves her hand in a circular pattern while pinching her nose. The smell confirms it. Burned porridge. Oops. What you're discovering, hour by hour, is that this gesture system isn't ornamental. It's functional. Essential, even. The convent is its own self-sustaining world, and the sign language is the lifeblood of its silence. Historians still argue whether these signs count as a language in the modern linguistic sense. After all, there's no complex grammar, no verb conjugation or past tense. But what they do agree on is this: it worked. For the daily needs of cloistered life, it absolutely worked. And it wasn't limited to the kitchen or dining hall. In the scriptorium, where sisters carefully copied manuscripts, psalters, prayer books, sometimes even medical treatises, the signs were just as useful. One quick gesture could signal more ink, finished page, or pass the knife, meaning the tool used to scrape parchment errors, not anything more sinister. Probably. Let's talk about that scriptorium for a moment, because it's surprisingly cozy. Despite the hard benches and ever-present danger of inkwell spills, the space feels sacred. The air smells of vellum and candle wax. A few high, stained glass windows let in muted light. A single sister clears her throat, once, and immediately looks apologetic, as though she's committed a minor felony. You're seated next to Sister Johanna, who has been working on a bestiary, a collection of illustrated animals with little moral lessons. Her owl looks like a potato with wings, but you're not judging. She signs, "Watch this," then proceeds to draw what appears to be a lion eating a pastry. You both suppress smiles. This is about as rebellious as convent life gets. The unspoken rule is that signs are allowed, but must be used judiciously. No flailing, no drama. Think minimalist ballet rather than Italian family dinner. The elegance of the system lies in its restraint. A single raised eyebrow can carry more weight than an entire sentence. One 12th century text from a Cistercian house in France includes over 250 codified signs, ranging from the very practical bread, book, toothache, to the unexpectedly niche psalm, verse out of order. Scholars love this stuff. It's basically medieval nun shorthand, and like all good shorthand, it adapted over time. Some signs were intuitive, point to your mouth for food, trace a cross over your chest for prayer. Others were more creative. The sign for abbess might involve miming a crown or touching your shoulder in a particular way, depending on the region. The sign for goat cheese, that one's lost to history, but you can imagine the possibilities. What's fascinating is how these sign systems varied wildly across Europe. A convent in Italy might have a completely different set of gestures than one in Wales, which makes sense. There wasn't exactly a universal nun sign language textbook being circulated. Instead, each community developed its own dialect, passed down through generations like family recipes or old ghost stories. Still, you'd be amazed how efficient it all becomes. By the time the day's chores are halfway done, you've signed boil, spoon, firewood, and, rather importantly, watch your veil, it's in the stew. There's no word for oops, but the apologetic grimace seems to be universal. Outside the kitchen, you spot two sisters tending the herb garden. One signs to the other, then hands over a sprig of what looks like yarrow. There's no discussion, but you know exactly what's going on. The infirmary needs restocking. Medicinal herbs were crucial in convents, and the sisters often ran the local clinics or almshouses. And yes, they signed there too, especially when dealing with patients who were frightened, confused, or maybe didn't speak Latin. Imagine, silent nurses, soothing with gestures rather than words. It's peaceful, really. All this quiet motion. It might even be more peaceful if your stomach wasn't reminding you that porridge alone isn't a complete breakfast. But you're getting used to it. By the time the Vesper bell rings, you've washed pots, folded laundry, copied half a page of psalms, and made at least 2 new friends, all without saying a word. The silence is starting to feel less like a rule and more like a comfort. A soft blanket wrapped around the day. As night falls again and the nuns gather in the chapel, you notice something lovely. A small gesture, a circle over the heart, passed from one sister to another. It's not in any of the official lists, but it feels familiar, like a quiet kind of, "Good job today." No one speaks, no one needs to. You wake to the muffled toll of the morning bell, echoing through the thick convent walls. It's barely dawn, the sky still a smudge of pewter, and you're already slipping into your woolen habit with movements slow from sleep. The stone floor feels especially cold today, but your hands go through the motions on autopilot. You're learning the rhythm. Today's assigned duty is in the cloister garden, the small enclosed courtyard at the heart of the convent. You're not alone. Sister Beatrix, the de facto garden expert and a woman of very few facial expressions, is already pruning a bush that looks vaguely medicinal, or maybe just aggressive. She gestures for you to come closer, then taps her temple and makes a motion with her hand that looks like writing. You squint, confused. She repeats the sign, tap, scribble, point to the plant. Ah. She's asking if you remember the Latin name for it. You do not. She gives a slight, dignified sigh, then signs wormwood, followed by a gesture that probably means, try harder next time. You suspect she's being kind. The sign language here isn't just for chores or formal silence, It's for teaching, for mentorship, for nuance, and in this case, for subtle sass. As you tend to the plants, lavender, comfrey, calendula, you notice how the sisters use their hands constantly, not just for digging and clipping, but for whole conversations that pass like whispers in the air. It's especially useful during the great silence, the stretch from evening prayer to morning mass when verbal speech is completely forbidden. During those hours, the signs become lifelines. One sister gestures that she needs more twine. Another signals a minor injury, nothing serious, just a nick on the thumb. A third silently requests help moving a heavy planter box, though her exaggerated lifting motion makes it look more like interpretive dance. You're starting to appreciate the range of expression. Historians still debate how widespread these sign systems were outside monastic communities. Some suggest that similar gestures appeared in guilds, kitchens, even among medieval shepherds who needed to communicate across long distances. But in convents, they became formalized, sacred tools, not just workarounds. Back in the garden, you learn the signs for rain, worm, and stop stepping on the beets. Sister Beatrix is a woman of few signs, but each one lands with the gravity of Scripture. She teaches by example, occasionally pausing to let you mimic her gestures. When you get one wrong, she offers a small correction, a tap on your wrist, a soft frown. It feels oddly intimate, not in a romantic sense, but in the quiet solidarity of shared silence. Then something shifts. A small bird has gotten into the garden. Nothing dramatic, just a little brown sparrow hopping along the edge of the herb beds. But one of the younger novices freezes in place. She signs rapidly, feather, bad luck, watch. You blink. Is this superstition? Apparently, yes. Some convents had their own systems of omens, tiny inherited bits of folklore passed down like secret recipes. A bird in the garden might mean an upcoming visitor. A double-yolked egg? Marriage, though obviously not for the nuns. And sneezing 3 times in chapel? Definitely bad. You can't help but chuckle, quietly of course. Even in the most sacred spaces, humans find ways to invent little rules, to make sense of chaos. You take a break on a bench near the cloister walk, watching as the morning light brightens the red roof tiles and flickers through the vine-covered archways. The stone is warm now. A few bees hover near the lavender. Somewhere behind you, the faint rustle of robes, followed by the sign for lunch soon. That one you've memorized. As you walk back toward the kitchens, you pass the laundry courtyard where several sisters are washing garments in a large wooden basin. Their hands are busy with soap and linen, but they still manage to carry on an animated conversation entirely in signs. Judging by the occasional smirk, it's either gossip or theology. The truth is, this language, this gesture code, has become a social glue. Without it, the silence would be isolating. But with it, there's connection, expression, even playfulness. Some of the signs are unmistakably cheeky. There's one for someone's watching, involving a dramatic eye point, and another that's basically, that sermon went on forever. You witness both during lunch. By now, the signs have seeped into everything. The passing of bowls, the cleaning of tables, the preparation for noon prayer. You barely notice yourself doing it, raising your hand flat for thank you, tapping your temple for I'll remember, tilting your head for can you repeat that? There's a rhythm to it, a silent choreography. What's fascinating is that these signs allowed nuns to preserve the sacred vow of silence while still maintaining a working community. It was a loophole, yes, but an elegant one. No shouting across rooms, no interrupting prayers, just hands in motion, like moths flickering in candlelight. Later that afternoon, you're sent to help in the infirmary, where Sister Rosamond is tending to an elderly woman from the nearby village. She's not a nun, just someone in need of care. She doesn't speak Latin and seems confused, maybe even frightened, but Sister Rosamond kneels beside her and gently signs, slowly, as if the gestures themselves are balm. The woman relaxes. You watch this, struck by the grace of it, the deliberate slowness, the patience, the way silence becomes a kindness. Historians might never know the full extent of these convent sign systems. Few were written down in full. Most lived only in the hands of those who used them. But in this quiet moment, you understand. They were never just about silence. They were about community, compassion, connection. By the end of the day, your hands are sore and your feet ache, but your mind is oddly clear. The world feels quieter, gentler, as if the silence has stopped being empty and started being full. You sign "good work" to the sister beside you. She smiles, then signs back, "Rest well." By the third week, the signs start to slip into your dreams. Not full sentences, not coherent thoughts, just gestures, floating through the soft fog of sleep. A hand tapping a brow, 2 fingers brushing a shoulder, a spiral drawn in the air. You don't know what they mean, but they feel familiar, comforting even. When you wake, it's still dark. The convent bell hasn't rung yet, but somewhere, out in the courtyard, you hear the soft clatter of a pail. Someone's already begun the morning chores. You rise, wrap your shawl, and head out. The air is thick with dew. Every surface glistens slightly in the pale moonlight. You pass under the stone archway and into the orchard, where Sister Imelda is gathering apples into a wicker basket. She sees you and raises one hand, thumb tucked, palm outward. Peace. You return the gesture, almost without thinking. This is the deeper gift of the sign language. Not just survival in silence, but a kind of fluency in presence. You begin to notice details you'd once ignored. The way people breathe before signing, the slight pause that gives space for thought, the expressiveness of fingers even when they're still. It makes you slow down. It makes you observe. Later that morning, during the chapter meeting, the abbess addresses the group. Not with words, not at first, but with signs, complex ones, full of layered meaning. She speaks of obedience, of humility, of a newly arrived novice from the southern provinces. There's a bit of confusion. A few of the sisters are unfamiliar with one of her gestures, and she pauses to repeat it, slower this time. This isn't rare. The sign systems aren't always standardized. That's one of the more charming wrinkles. Some gestures vary between convents, even between generations. One group might use a fist on heart for prayer, while another favors 2 fingertips to the chin. There were attempts in some regions to catalog and unify these gestures, particularly among the Cistercians, but much of it remained fluid, oral, and embodied. Historians still argue whether this flexibility was a strength or a weakness. Some say it made preservation harder. Others believe it allowed the language to stay alive, adapting, shifting, bending like a reed in the wind. After the meeting, Sister Lucia corners you, figuratively speaking, with a few energetic signs about the feast day preparations. The gesture for saint is one you're still getting the hang of. She makes it with flair, 2 fingers raised above her head, then a circle drawn in the air. You nod slowly, signaling understanding. Though you're about 70% sure she's also telling you to help decorate the altar with wildflowers. Or possibly that the last batch of honey cakes burned. Either way, you follow her to the kitchen. Here's where things get lively. Sister Dorothea, the cook, is deaf, entirely so. But she runs the kitchen like a ship captain during a storm. Her signs are crisp, emphatic, and slightly terrifying. She points at you, then at a mound of dough, then makes a twisting motion that probably translates to knead like your life depends on it. You do. The kitchen is a whirlwind of flour and fast fingers. Signs fly across the room. More spice, watch the fire, you've got sugar on your nose. You can't help but grin. No one's speaking, but the air hums with activity. What's remarkable is that Dorothea wasn't trained in a formal deaf school. Those didn't really exist in this era, not for women, certainly not for nuns. But within the convent she thrives. Her whole world is shaped by this handmade, shared language. In many ways, she's the most fluent of them all. One novice drops a spoon. Dorothea raises an eyebrow and signs something fast that makes everyone else giggle. You miss the meaning, but the laughter is infectious. Apparently, it was a classic Dorothea zinger. You're told later it involved comparing clumsy hands to a drunk goat on stilts. Lunch that day is honey-sweetened porridge and spiced root stew, modest but comforting. You sit with Sister Agnes, who is teaching you the more obscure signs: squirrel, melancholy, and 12 geese in a field. It's unclear when you'll ever need that last one, but she seems delighted by your attempts to copy it. As the meal ends, the abbess signs a final blessing, and the sisters respond in unison, right hand to heart, then outstretched palm, a silent amen. You're starting to realize something important. This language isn't just practical, it's liturgical, spiritual. The hands are used to worship, to bless, to confess. One of the most sacred signs is simple: fingers crossed at the wrist, held to the chest. It means mercy. Later, during Vespers, you catch sight of it again, this time in the candlelight, as Sister Imelda kneels beside the altar. She signs mercy with closed eyes. The flame flickers. Her lips do not move. There's an elegance to this silence, a restraint that feels deeply countercultural, especially when compared to the outside world of traders, town criers, and tavern songs. Within the convent walls, speech is rationed. Words are sacred, and gestures. Gestures become the soul's language. One of the more obscure historical facts, tucked away in a dusty chronicle from the 13th century, claims that certain nuns even composed entire prayers in sign form. Full devotions performed in utter silence, their meanings traced in the air like invisible ink. No proof remains, but it feels plausible. The day ends in the scriptorium, where you're assigned to illuminate the margins of a psalter. Your brush hand shakes a little. It's been a long day, but you manage to paint a small figure in the corner, a nun, mid-sign. Perhaps peace, perhaps tea. It doesn't matter. You know she's saying something. Behind you, Sister Dorothea passes, sees the tiny figure, and gives a crooked grin. She raises 2 fingers, taps her chin, and signs, "Beautiful." By the 3rd week, the signs start to slip into your dreams. Not full sentences, not coherent thoughts, just gestures, floating through the soft fog of sleep. A hand tapping a brow, 2 fingers brushing a shoulder, a spiral drawn in the air. You don't know what they mean, but they feel familiar, comforting even. When you wake, it's still dark. The convent bell hasn't rung yet, but somewhere, out in the courtyard, you hear the soft clatter of a pail. Someone's already begun the morning chores. You rise, wrap your shawl, and head out. The air is thick with dew. Every surface glistens slightly in the pale moonlight. You pass under the stone archway and into the orchard, where Sister Imelda is gathering apples into a wicker basket. She sees you and raises one hand, thumb tucked, palm outward. Peace. You return the gesture, almost without thinking. This is the deeper gift of the sign language, not just survival in silence, but a kind of fluency in presence. You begin to notice details you'd once ignored, the way people breathe before signing, the slight pause that gives space for thought, the expressiveness of fingers even when they're still. It makes you slow down. It makes you observe. Later that morning, during the chapter meeting, the abbess addresses the group. Not with words, not at first, but with signs, complex ones, full of layered meaning. She speaks of obedience, of humility, of a newly arrived novice from the southern provinces. There's a bit of confusion. A few of the sisters are unfamiliar with one of her gestures, and she pauses to repeat it, slower this time. This isn't rare. The sign systems aren't always standardized. That's one of the more charming wrinkles. Some gestures vary between convents, even between generations. One group might use a fist on heart for prayer, while another favors 2 fingertips to the chin. There were attempts in some regions to catalog and unify these gestures, particularly among the Cistercians, but much of it remained fluid, oral, and embodied. Historians still argue whether this flexibility was a strength or a weakness. Some say it made preservation harder. Others believe it allowed the language to stay alive, adapting, shifting, bending like a reed in the wind. After the meeting, Sister Lucia corners you, figuratively speaking, with a few energetic signs about the feast day preparations. The gesture for saint is one you're still getting the hang of. She makes it with flair, 2 fingers raised above her head, then a circle drawn in the air. You nod slowly, signaling understanding, though you're about 70% sure she's also telling you to help decorate the altar with wildflowers, or possibly that the last batch of honey cakes burned. Either way, you follow her to the kitchen. Here's where things get lively. Sister Dorothea, the cook, is deaf, entirely so, but she runs the kitchen like a ship captain during a storm. Her signs are crisp, emphatic, and slightly terrifying. She points at you, then at a mound of dough, then makes a twisting motion that probably translates to knead like your life depends on it. You do. The kitchen is a whirlwind of flour and fast fingers. Signs fly across the room. More spice, watch the fire, you've got sugar on your nose. You can't help but grin. No one's speaking, but the air hums with activity. The next morning, you wake to rain. Soft, persistent, contemplative. The kind of rain that drips from eaves and clings to the edges of cloaks. It paints the cobblestones in mottled grays and turns the herb garden into a glistening patchwork of mint and misery. You pull on your shawl, wool, roughly woven, still faintly smelling of lavender from the drying room, and head out, careful not to slip on the wet stone. The morning bell has already tolled. Matins is behind you. You're moving into that liminal space between breakfast and assigned duties. A quiet hour, usually filled with tasks too small to name. Today's assignment? Laundry, in the rain. You trudge toward the washing station, a low-roofed structure with open sides and a stone basin fed by a spring-fed spout. The water's cold, always cold, and your hands begin to ache within moments. Across from you, Sister Cecily rings out a shift, her sleeves soaked to the elbow. She gives you a faint smile, then taps her wrist and draws a circle. Time. Then taps her lips, twice. To talk. It's a joke, because of course you're not allowed to. But the sign still makes you laugh under your breath, and that's enough. You fall into rhythm together. Scrub, rinse, ring, sign. The signs come faster now. Soap, stain, that goat again. Cecily signs the last one with flair. 2 horns, a prancing step, and a dramatic swoon to mimic Sister Juliana's recent goat-related mishap. You can't help it, you giggle. That's the thing about this sign language. It opens a door not just to clarity, but to playfulness. Humor slips through where words aren't allowed. A shared glance, a fast sign, a subtle exaggeration. Suddenly, the work doesn't feel quite so heavy. After a while, the rain lightens, then stops altogether. Mist curls across the lawn. Somewhere, a rooster crows, late, confused, or just opinionated. You pause to stretch your back, and that's when you notice a group of novices gathered under the cloister arch, hands moving rapidly in practiced motion. They're rehearsing, not lines, but prayers. You wander closer. They're practicing the credo, not spoken, but signed. Each word is paired with a gesture. I believe becomes a closed fist to the chest. In God is 2 hands raised skyward, then lowered gently, palms open. It's beautiful. One novice fumbles the sign for incarnate. She mimes something that looks more like baked bread. The others try not to laugh, but it bubbles up anyway. Silently, of course, shoulders shaking. The sister leading the lesson signs, try again, patient and kind. This is your new favorite thing, not just the learning, but the attempt, the permission to be clumsy, the recognition that sacred things can still be awkward. Historians still argue whether these signed prayers were ever considered official liturgy. Some suggest they were supplemental. Others believe they carried the same spiritual weight. Either way, the practice spread widely. Manuscripts from as far apart as Burgundy and Aragon contain marginal notes indicating which gestures to use during certain feasts. Later that day, during the midday meal, you find yourself seated beside Sister Magda. She's older, with knotted knuckles and a jaw that seems permanently clenched. You've never heard her speak, not even during permitted hours. You assumed it was her choice. But now, as the sisters bow their heads in grace and the table falls into quiet movement, she signs something to you. "Bread, please." Simple, director. You blink in surprise and pass her the loaf. She smiles, then signs again. "Thank you." That moment sticks with you. You realize you've been imagining a barrier between the speakers and the signers. But that's not how it works here. There's no neat binary. Everyone moves fluidly between silence and gesture, as needed. It's not disability, it's design. Not limitation, but language. Later in the afternoon, you return to the scriptorium. Today's task, copying a short tract on the virtues of contemplative silence. The irony is not lost on you. The quill scratches softly. Ink pools in the descenders. Your neck begins to ache. Across the table, Sister Inez signs a quiet joke. She mimes snoring, then draws a halo above her head. "Sleeping saint." You snort. The sound echoes more loudly than expected, and both of you freeze, eyes wide. Then a grin spreads across her face, and she signs, "Busted." The prioress passes by moments later, glancing at your parchment. She doesn't comment on the joke, but as she walks away, she brushes one hand over her heart and flicks it outward. Forgiven. That evening, you gather with the others in the chapel. Vespers is sung, but afterward, there is a signed litany. A special observance for the feast of St. Cuthbert. The entire community rises, then begins a slow, rhythmic series of gestures. It's like watching poetry. Hands move in tandem, tracing blessings into the candlelight. Palms open in offering, fingers arc into circles of protection. Eyes remain soft, focused inward. The entire room becomes a sculpture of devotion. And in that moment, you understand. This isn't just silence, it's choreography, it's prayer. It's a language written not on paper, but in air. You leave the chapel with your heart feeling slightly warmer, your hands slightly steadier. The stars are out. The courtyard smells of damp stone and rosemary. You pause, just for a moment, and sign peace to the sky. No one sees it, but somehow it still feels answered. You wake the next morning to the smell of beeswax and thyme. The candles have just been trimmed in the chapel, and the herb-strewn rushes in the hallway are fresh, crunching softly under your sandals as you walk. It's the kind of morning that feels suspended in time, cool, bright, and oddly optimistic. Today, you're assigned to the infirmary. It's not as grim as it sounds, not this week at least. No fevers, no infected wounds, just Sister Blanche and her famously dramatic migraines, and a few novices who swear they have walking chills, but mostly just want to avoid garden duty. You find yourself stationed by the apothecary shelves, tasked with sorting dried valerian root from lemon balm. Your fingers move nimbly, separating the herbs while your mind drifts. You hum a little, quietly, until you catch Sister Blanche signing pointedly from across the room. Too loud. You grin. She's lying flat on a straw pallet, a damp cloth over her eyes, and yet she still finds the strength to be bossy. You sign back. Too dramatic. She lifts the cloth just enough to glare at you. You mime swooning with great flair. The cloth drops back down with a sigh. 10 minutes later, one of the novices, Judith, shuffles in, holding her stomach. She doesn't speak. Instead, she signs a careful sequence you haven't seen before. You raise an eyebrow. She repeats it, slower. You glance towards Sister Anselma, the infirmarian. She watches the exchange with quiet interest. Is she trying to say, cramps? You sign. Anselma nods. Close. The actual sign is more like this. She gestures, twisting her fingers into a downward spiral and tapping her abdomen twice. But she's learning, inventing a bit too. You file the gesture away for later. That's another truth about this sign language. It's not static. It grows. It adapts. When there isn't a word for something, the sisters build one. Some signs are universal across orders: bread, prayer, abbess. Others are highly localized. In one convent, the sign for sin might be a finger dragging across the throat. In another, it's a downward flick of the ear. Historians still argue whether there was ever a standardized dialect. Most agree that the signs traveled with the nuns themselves, changing slightly from region to region like an accent. You help Judith settle down with a heated stone wrapped in cloth. She signs, "Thank you," a little lopsided, but sincere. By midday, the infirmary is quiet again. Sister Blanche has decided to bravely move to the reading corner, and Anselma sends you out for a break. You wander into the cloister where the garden is in bloom. Bees hum lazily over the lavender. A few sisters are working near the vegetable beds. One of them, Lucia, is trying to explain something to Sister Agnes using only signs and increasingly dramatic facial expressions. You approach just in time to catch the phrase, "The rabbit ate the carrots." Agnes frowns. "What rabbit?" Lucia signs, "The very fat one." You raise a brow. "There's a new rabbit?" Lucia nods and signs a wild series of movements, ears, hopping, sneaking. Then she pulls from her satchel a leaf with a single, perfect tooth mark. The evidence. This turns into a whole discussion, entirely in sign, about how to rabbit-proof the garden. One sister suggests building a little fence, another recommends a noise charm, which you're pretty sure doesn't work, and a third proposes asking the prioress for a cat. That last one causes visible panic in Sister Henrietta, who's famously allergic and immediately signs, "No, never," over my dead body. And again, you're struck by the range of this silent language. It isn't just chores and prayer, it's gossip, it's garden sabotage, it's personal opinions and humorous overstatements. You even catch a new joke being born. When someone mimes two large ears and signs blame, it's now code for "the rabbit did it." You return to the infirmary just before dusk and find Sister Blanche holding court. She's upright now, sipping weak elderflower tea and giving exaggerated instructions to a few young novices who are applying balm to her temples. One of them, you notice, is giggling behind her hand. You pause in the doorway. Blanche catches your eye and signs, "Tell them I nearly died." You sign back, "Of drama, yes." Later, as you prepare for Compline, the final prayers of the day, you reflect on how quickly this once alien system has become familiar. You've learned over 100 signs in just a few days, and you're beginning to think in them. Walking to the chapel, you notice Sister Magda signing to the shadows, not out of madness or eccentricity, but as part of her prayers. No one's there. She just signs into the air, long flowing movements that seem more felt than taught. A hand over her heart, a spiral outward, a downward flutter of fingers that looks oddly like falling rain. You don't interrupt. The chapel is dim when you arrive. Just a few beeswax tapers flickering near the altar. You kneel in your stall, and before you close your eyes, you sign a small blessing. It's barely visible, but you feel it in your hands. The night falls like a velvet curtain. One of the cows lows in the distance. And for a moment, you wonder what the sign is for content. Maybe it's just this: stillness, breath, candlelight. The next morning begins with a surprise. Just after prime, when the air is still crisp and the dew hasn't yet surrendered to the sun, you're summoned to the scriptorium. This is usually the domain of the elder sisters, painstakingly copying sacred texts with trembling hands and immaculate patience. You're half convinced the ink alone has outlived some of its users. But today, you're not here to scribe. Sister Hilaria meets you at the doorway with ink-stained fingertips and an excited glint in her eye. "You're decent with a quill," she signs briskly. "We need a chart." You blink. She leads you past rows of high-backed chairs and desks strewn with parchment until you reach a long table cleared of everything except one massive sheet of vellum. "La signa," she signs, smiling. The sign. It's a working draft of the convent's own sign language system. What began as scattered notes in the margins of prayer books is now becoming something more formal, a lexicon. You take a seat and begin. Hilaria hands you a thin brush and points to a cluster of existing entries. Silence, prayer, bread, work. Each is illustrated with a tiny drawing of hands mid-gesture, alongside a brief Latin gloss. You're to add new terms today, ones that have come into regular use but haven't yet been codified. First up, soup. It takes several attempts to draw it right. Cupped hands, one mimicking a ladle motion, the other braced like a bowl. Hilaria watches with an approving nod. Next, cold feet. Apparently, a favorite winter complaint. The sisters have adopted a motion that looks like tiptoeing while clutching your ankles. You illustrate it with great care. And then, just before sext, a special request from Sister Thomasina. Clumsy. You nearly snort with laughter. Her preferred sign is dramatic. 2 hands flailing, then smacking an invisible wall. You capture the gesture with an exaggerated swirl of fingers, and Hilaria laughs so hard she nearly upsets the ink pot. There's a gentle joy in this strange morning, not just in the creativity, but in the realization that you're witnessing language evolve in real time. Historians still argue whether these convent sign systems count as full-fledged languages or merely symbolic aids. But from where you're sitting, carefully sketching a sign for too much cabbage, it sure feels like something alive. By midday, your fingers are cramped and your neck aches, but the vellum is filling with words, with gestures, with voices that don't need sound. You break for the midday meal, rubbing ink from your wrists. As you walk toward the refectory, you notice something odd. A group of novices are signing rapidly by the well and giggling. You pause just long enough to catch the gestures. Blanch, bathtub, sneeze, flood. You raise an eyebrow. That's quite a story. But before you can ask, one of them notices you and signs nothing, far too quickly to be convincing. You're tempted to ask Sister Blanche later, but you value your life, or at least your eyebrows, too much. During the meal, silence reigns as always, but hands move constantly. A novice signs, "Pass the salt." Another responds, "Not yours, mine." You catch Sister Petra scolding someone for using the wrong sign for lentils. Apparently, a closed fist means lentils, while an open palm means beans. An easy mistake, but Petra is a stickler for culinary accuracy. And then, halfway through the meal, a minor emergency. A spilled bowl of stew. In sound, it would be a clatter and a shriek. Here, it's sudden motion. Hands flying up, eyes wide. The nearest sister signs rapidly, "Spoon! Floor! Sorry! Hot!" A cloth appears almost instantly. Order is restored within seconds. You marvel at how efficient the chaos is. Later that day, as you walk the outer wall path for exercise, you run into Sister Anselma again. She's carrying a basket of dried herbs and stops to chat. Silently, of course. She asks if you've seen the new signs added to the chart. You nod. "Clumsy is my favorite." She signs back, laughing. "Figures." You grin and ask, "Did every convent invent their own?" "Not all," she signs. "Some borrowed. Others resisted entirely." You remember reading once that Cistercian monasteries were especially strict. often discouraging gestures unless absolutely necessary. But here, the language breathes, and Selma tells you a story then, an old one, about a nun in Burgundy who supposedly developed an entire silent play using only signs. She performed it during Advent for sisters too frail to attend full services. It became an annual tradition, handed down like an heirloom. Historians still debate whether the play ever truly existed or if it was just a particularly imaginative scribe's embellishment. But it's the kind of tale that sticks with you. You return to the scriptorium just before Vespers. The vellum sheet is dry now, pinned neatly in place. You notice a new entry someone's added: wind. It's simple, 2 fingers fluttering forward like breath. It's beautiful. And you think, not for the first time, that silence isn't the absence of language. It's just a different way of telling the same stories. That night, as you lie in your cot under the woolen blanket, you replay the signs in your head like a dream. Wind, clumsy, soup, rabbit, blessing. You fall asleep with your hands resting gently together, palms cupped, not in prayer exactly, but in peace. Your fingers ache from churning butter. Again. The sisters insist that even divine contemplation must be paired with physical labor, and so you find yourself elbow deep in curds while silently reciting psalms. And when Sister Agnes breaks a jar of honey with a startled yelp, having spotted a particularly aggressive beetle, you both share a quick sign. It means danger. Also, oops. Tonight, you're learning that sign language didn't just evolve for sacred moments or silent prayer. No. In a place where talking was mostly off-limits, gestures became essential for chores, farm duties, and snack-related emergencies. The B sign is a fluttering wiggle of the fingers. Milk is a pinch and squeeze. Firewood, a quick arm swing like hefting a bundle. Some historians argue that these workaday signs weren't recorded formally, so we'll never fully know their scope. Others point out that practical signs, those created by lay sisters or kitchen workers, may have outnumbered the liturgical ones. It makes sense. You can't stop churning butter just to mime Latin poetry. The nuns grew a rich ecosystem of shared meaning out of sheer necessity. Over time, even complex concepts like bad weather, itchy tunic, or there's a mouse in the bread again gained physical expressions. And despite the rules, these gestures often smuggled in laughter. A cheeky hand flick might mean, Sister Mary has cheese breath. A mock-serious bow could say, the abbess is watching. Outside, birds chirp. Inside, hands flutter. Language, without a single word spoken. You find that kind of communication oddly peaceful, like a dance you don't need music for. Midwinter cloaks the cloister in a muffled hush. The stones are cold under your bare feet, and your breath makes soft clouds as you make your way to the refectory. Breakfast will be boiled barley, again. But it's not the food you dread. It's the silence. This is the hour of strict silence, when no one, not even the abbess, may speak aloud. But of course, humans are gloriously incapable of doing anything truly silently. There's the soft slap of sandals, the creak of ancient wood benches, the polite coughing of Sister Bernadette, who absolutely has hay fever year-round. And then the signs begin. One sister points to her bowl and draws a small circle. More porridge, please. Another taps her temple, then gestures to the window. She forgot to close the shutters again. And someone, with great theatrical flair, mimes the flick of a mouse tail and makes a pinching face. There was a mouse in my bed. Historians still debate how formalized these signs were. Some records show detailed glossaries, while others suggest each convent developed its own homegrown dialect. That means a nun from York might completely misinterpret a signal from one in Toulouse. It could go from God bless you to pass the cheese in an instant. And yet, this regionalism gave the signs charm. Like dialects, they reflected the lived experience of the community. They weren't just about preserving silence, they were about building belonging. You sit down, bow your head, and join the wordless murmur of hands. The warmth of barley porridge does little for your fingers, but you find comfort in the subtle language all around you. In a world ruled by strict order, this quiet choreography feels like freedom. You sign simply, "Thanks." The bells echo through stone corridors again, but now they're different. Less of a call to prayer, more of a choreographed signal. You're sweeping the cloisters with a straw broom that sheds little wisps of hay every time it touches the ground. You glance up just in time to catch Sister Imelda pointing 2 fingers at her mouth. No sound escapes her lips, but you know what she means. It's time for the evening broth. You nod, raise a closed fist to your chest, and she nods back, satisfied. You're getting good at this. Tonight's section is a quiet celebration of routine, because in a medieval convent, routine isn't just the wallpaper of life, it's the entire structure. Every hour, every movement, every gesture, orchestrated like a silent symphony. For many of the sisters, the absence of spoken word isn't a restriction, it's a release. Words can be messy, they can betray. But gestures, those are pure, director, satisfyingly unambiguous if you know the code. There's an unusual peace in walking through this place at twilight, the light catching the soft outlines of limestone carvings and trailing vines. You can smell the warm barley in the kitchens, hear the rhythm of sandals on stone, and taste the last of the afternoon's honeyed water on your tongue. There's a strange calm in knowing that the day is almost done, and everything has happened exactly as it should. Tonight's lesson was about signed modifiers, how to adjust a gesture to express time, quality, or urgency. It sounds tedious, but somehow you find yourself laughing, silently of course, at Sister Beatrix trying to mime scalding hot with such ferocity that she nearly drops her bowl. Even within vows of silence, humor lives. Historians still debate whether these gestural systems can truly be called a language in the modern sense. After all, the range of ideas was often limited to the immediate and practical. There's no evidence that nuns were signing full philosophical dialogues over their oaths, but it did allow for prayers, confessions, arguments over missing cheese wheels, and whispered gossip without the whisper. You're startled by the soft press of a hand on your elbow. It's the prioress. She points to the small candle in the corner alcove. Its flame is flickering low, dancing like a last heartbeat. You nod and head over, cup your hands, and gently snuff it. The room is instantly dimmer, hushed, wrapped in cool blue shadow. In this twilight quiet, you find yourself wondering what it's like to be a woman in this place for decades. Growing from novitiate to elder, your voice unused except in prayer. There are records of women entering convents as children and leaving only for burial. Some did so willingly, others, not so much. But within these walls, many found unexpected agency, literacy, status, safety. And yes, silence, but not powerlessness. The hand signs gave shape to lives that were otherwise unspoken. They gave order to kitchens, solace to sickbeds, and a way to share that the turnip stew was, well, deeply disappointing. Tonight's turnip stew, for the record, is aggressively bland. You and your neighbor both sign a swift horizontal wave, nun shorthand for pass the salt, and stifle a grin as it passes between you. Your seat is worn smooth. Your habits itched earlier, but now you barely notice. You are, in a word, settled. The same way the floor settles beneath your feet and the moon settles in the sky. You think about the sisters who came before you, centuries of women whose names you'll never know, who built this quiet world sign by sign, who raised their hands when their voices weren't allowed, who passed on a language, not through books, but through years of mimed patience and pointed fingers. You don't know their stories, but somehow as you clean up your bowl and gesture goodnight to Sister Agnes. You feel them with you. Their silence is the same silence that wraps you now, soft, vast, and strangely full. You wake before dawn. Not to the sound of a bell this time, but to the hush of movement, the quiet scuff of sandals, and the faint creak of a wooden door as it eases open. A cold draft brushes against your face, carrying with it the sharp scent of dew and chimney smoke. You sit up slowly, blink against the soft gray light. The sisters are already rising like so many ghosts in wimples. No one speaks. Why would they? Each gesture has already been made 100 times before. This morning's task is washing. Laundry for the outer cloister, linens for the infirmary, veils and habits for the novices. You pad across cold flagstones, fingers fumbling with your belt cord, and fall into step with the others. The stream is icy. It always is. But there's a comfort in the repetition. Wooden paddles slap wet fabric with practiced rhythm. Water sloshes, soap bubbles glisten, catching the first glints of sun. You glance to your left. Sister Juliana is furrowing her brow at a stubborn stain. She signs something quick and sharp. You smirk. It's the nun-speak equivalent of a sigh and a complaint about someone's poor table manners, specifically the beetroot incident from yesterday. Scrubbing clothes in silence might seem like the stuff of historical punishment, but here, it's also a moment of community. It's physical, rhythmic, almost meditative. Each of you works in tandem, muscles engaged, fingers numbed, thoughts quiet. You're not thinking about your former life or the world beyond the convent walls. Just the satisfying splash of cloth in water and the warm promise of bread and honey waiting back in the kitchen. Historians still argue whether the rules around silence were universally strict, or if individual abbeys adapted them with pragmatism. Some accounts describe entire silent seasons. Others mention permission days, when speech was briefly allowed. But one thing is clear: communication thrived, even under constraint. As you wring out the last tunic, a light rain begins, soft, almost polite, the kind that glimmers on stone and leaves behind the scent of wet time. You tilt your face upward. No one stops working, but you notice Sister Agnes lifting a hand, palm up, turning it slightly in a shared sign. Rain. Not unwelcome. Just rain. Back inside, you help hang the damp fabrics on lines strung in the warm cloister walk. Steam from the kitchen windows curls into the air, and someone passes you a crust of coarse bread spread with curdled milk and herbs. You chew slowly, not minding the sharpness. You've eaten worse. Today's lesson is about prepositions, or rather, how to gesture at location, direction, and ownership. In theory, you're learning how to say things like, "The cat is on the book," or "Give Sister Althea her embroidery back." In practice, you're mostly pointing at chickens and attempting to mime underneath without looking ridiculous. Sister Imelda, your teacher for the day, demonstrates with the solemnity of a court clerk. She signs, "The ladle is behind the pot." Then she signs again, faster, then again, then nods at you. You blink. You sign something you hope is similar. She blinks back. It's hard to tell if you've passed or invented a new theology. But the learning is slow, soft, shared. There's no penalty for error, only repetition. And repetition is the convent's secret language in and of itself. You don't master things here. You just do them again, and again, and again, until one day they feel like breathing. As evening edges closer, the sisters gather in the garden. No formal reason, just a moment of sun and rosemary and quiet. The bees are working overtime. One lands on your wrist, studies you with a vibrating patience, then buzzes off toward a blooming patch of sage. You watch it go, feeling something between admiration and envy. The prioress walks slowly past. She lifts her hand and flicks 2 fingers skyward. Evening. Rest. You nod and gesture back. Gratitude. There's a warmth here that isn't born of fire. It's the warmth of quiet understanding, of knowing when someone wants help without needing to say so, of noticing a sore back from laundry and signing, "Sit, I'll finish," of sharing a cracked bowl because the others are in use and not needing to apologize. And maybe that's the heart of it. The silence isn't absence, it's space. Room for other forms of kindness, room for thought, for the divine, for bees and bread and the perfectly wrung cloth. You stretch your fingers, sore from both signing and scrubbing. The muscles in your hands feel like they've memorized something ancient. You glance upward at the soft evening sky, tinted peach and slate, and think, this is a language no one taught you. Not really. It taught you. You sleep better tonight. Maybe it's the clean sheets, still smelling faintly of soap and sun. Maybe it's the ache in your arms from a day spent ringing, folding, and communicating with just your fingertips. Maybe it's the breeze coming through the high dormitory window, threading itself between the beds like a lullaby made of air. Or maybe, just maybe, it's because, for the first time in a long time, you didn't have to explain yourself with words. The next morning, you wake to the bell for prime. Your body's catching on to the rhythm now. It's no longer a rude jolt, but a gentle nudge. You rise, robe yourself, wash your face in the basin of rainwater by the door. The water's cold enough to snap your thoughts into focus. Today is a feast day, not one of the major ones. You're not pulling out relics or preparing martyred vegetables in the kitchen, but still a minor celebration. Saint Romula, the woman who once lived for 20 years in a single room and, legend says, developed the ability to smell lies. Historians still argue whether she truly had this divine olfactory gift, or if it was simply monastic metaphor taken too literally. Either way, the Feast of Saint Romula means a slightly later breakfast and an afternoon lesson in hagiography, stories of saints both plausible and deeply, deeply questionable. You file into the scriptorium after breakfast, your feet padding across the rush-covered floor. Today, the novices are copying a particularly dramatic tale involving a saint, a miraculous goose, and a sword that wouldn't stay buried. But your task is different. You're learning how to sign the names of saints, each one condensed into a swift, sacred shorthand. Some, like St. Catherine, have clear gestures, a spoked wheel traced in the air, fingers turning gently. Others, like St. Romula, are more interpretive. You press your palm to your nose, then gesture outward with a shrug. You're told this is accurate enough. Next to you, Sister Maud suppresses a giggle. You catch her eye and mirror the gesture. Two silent nuns, in full habit, miming divine olfactory truth. It's as close to rebellion as you'll get. You break for the midday meal with ink-stained fingers and a head full of saints who didn't die so much as evaporate into legend. Lunch is stew and barley bread and a small honeyed fig, rare and precious, even if it sticks to your teeth. The prioress stands at the head of the table, signs a short blessing, and then everyone begins to eat. The only sounds are spoons, swallowing, and the occasional hiccup muffled in linen. Conversation, if needed, is all gesture now, fluid, efficient, strange. You'd think it would make meals feel colder, more mechanical. Instead, it makes them sacred. Every movement becomes intentional. Every glance, every finger twitch, every shared crumb carries meaning. A sister silently slides you the last fig from her bowl and signs, "You look tired." You sign back, "It's Saint Romula's fault." She snorts quietly through her nose. You both keep eating. In the afternoon, you're assigned to help in the herb garden. The novice in charge of you is called Sister Petronilla, and she knows the sign for every plant, root, and unfortunate rash that requires them. She's not technically supposed to speak, but when she bends close to point at the calendula, you hear her whisper, "Good for burns. Terrible in tea. Don't let the cook tell you otherwise." You raise an eyebrow. She grins, then signs, "Don't tell?" You nod. Secret kept. The garden is orderly but not stiff, basil spilling over low walls, lavender buzzing with bees, a wild patch of nettles allowed to grow just enough to remind you not everything here is tame. You help harvest wormwood, fennel, and a few bundles of chamomile for the infirmary. Your robes brush against the rosemary as you move, leaving your hem scented like a roast. Somewhere nearby, a bird begins to sing. You look up, trying to spot it. Sister Petronilla catches your gaze and shrugs. She signs, probably thinks it's Vespers. Back in the cloister, the novices practice the week's new gestures. The sign for miracle is oddly graceful, an open palm flicked upward like releasing a feather. Sacrament is more complex, involving both hands and a small bow. And temptation, well, that one depends on context. You're told never to confuse it with the sign for bread, though apparently the overlap is theological. You sit on a bench near the sun-warmed wall, watching the others. A bee lands on your knee, as if to check your credentials. You hold perfectly still, then gently sign, "Shoo." It doesn't listen. Bees rarely do. You look over and see the prioress watching you, amusement crinkling at the edge of her eyes. She signs, "Some students take longer to learn." You sign back, "That's why I'm here." It's not sarcasm, not entirely. As the sun lowers in the sky, casting long shadows across the cloister, you feel something shift. You're not fluent, not yet, but your hands have stopped hesitating. The gestures are starting to feel like yours, like breathing, like prayer. This isn't just language, it's rhythm. It's a shared cadence, a kind of choreography between women who gave up speech, but not expression. Between the daily grind and divine devotion, you're starting to see why they built it this way. It's not silence, it's space. Your body has adjusted. You wake before the bell now. In the pre-dawn hush, you sit on the edge of your narrow bed and pull on your robe by touch alone. Your fingers already know the worn seams, the loop where the thread was mended last winter. You splash cold water on your face and your breath fogs in the quiet. No birdsong yet. Just the old bones of the abbey creaking softly, like it too is stretching before prayer. The chapel is cold but glowing faintly with candlelight. The windows are still dark. The stained glass doesn't shine. It broods. But the atmosphere isn't grim. It's anticipation. The hush before words, before gestures, before the divine machinery of the day begins. Today, you are helping Sister Heloise in the infirmary. You've heard rumors about Sister Heloise, that she once treated a knight who came back from crusade with a fever that made him forget how to speak, and that she taught him to communicate with only his eyes, that she brewed a potion from eel gall and dandelion root that cured the bishop's gout so effectively, he built her a new water barrel. Historians still argue whether Sister Heloise ever really performed these cures, or whether her reputation grew taller with each retelling in the candlelit cloister. But regardless, she runs the infirmary with the precision of a scribe and the expression of a very tired saint. The first patient is Sister Agnes, who twisted her ankle fetching laundry in the early morning mist. You help Eloise wrap it with linen dipped in comfrey and wine. No words are spoken, only gestures, meaningful looks, and the occasional raised eyebrow that communicates more than a page of parchment ever could. "Rest," Eloise signs. "No stairs." Agnes replies with an exaggerated sigh and a sign that means, roughly, "I'm not made of glass." By mid-morning, you've helped administer balm to 6 chilblains, soothed a nervous novice with dried poppy leaves, and interpreted a particularly animated description of a dream involving Saint Apollonia, a crown of frogs, and a very judgmental goat. It's hard to translate judgmental goat in hand speech, but you give it a try. Heloise, without breaking focus, signs back, "Use the sign for abbot, close enough." The next visitor is a young girl from the village, about 10 years old, barefoot, and holding a bruised apple. She's brought by her older sister, who signs poorly but clearly, "She stepped on a thorn. Can't walk." You kneel to examine the foot. Sure enough, a sliver of wood is embedded in the arch, tiny but angry looking. The girl winces and clutches the apple like it's a talisman. You smile, sign, hold still, and she glares at you like you're asking her to give up the moon. Heloise extracts the splinter with practiced care. You hold the girl's hand as she tries not to cry. Then she does cry, just a little, and you sign, "You were very brave," though your hands shake slightly from watching her tiny foot twitch. Before she leaves, the girl hands you the apple, as solemn as a knight bestowing a sword. You bow in return and mime taking a bite. It's not a great apple, if you're honest, mealy and bruised, but you eat it anyway. In the stillness after she goes, you and Heloise scrub your hands and clean the tools. She signs, "You'll make a good infirmarian." You sign back, "Only if they like bruised apples." She chuckles, just once, but it feels like a victory. Later that afternoon, as the sky begins to dim, you're called to help deliver herbs to the guest house. A visiting friar has arrived with a cough, and though he insists it's just monastery dust, you bring thyme and honey and instructions in gesture. He watches you, bemused, and tries to sign "thank you," but ends up miming something closer to "fence post." You gently correct him. He tries again. You nod. Close enough. As you leave the guest house, you pause at the threshold. The fields beyond the wall are golden in the fading light, like someone gilded the earth. You take a deep breath. It smells like wood smoke and early frost. You feel still, not frozen, not stuck, still. Back in the dormitory, you wash the dirt from under your nails, brush out your hair by candlelight, and watch as Sister Maud signs a goodnight joke involving a fish, a relic, and a very confused merchant. You laugh silently, trying not to wake the others. She signs, "Sleep well, Sister Fencepost." You lie back in your cot, apple core tucked under your bed, fingers tracing idle shapes against the blanket. You try the signs for peace, for tired, for tomorrow. Your hands know them now. They flow from you like breath. There's something miraculous about all of it. Outside the refectory, the sky is the color of ash. Rain has softened the paths, and your sandals leave ghost prints in the dirt as you walk. You're carrying a basket of root vegetables, parsnips and turnips mostly, with a few stubby carrots hiding beneath the burlap. The kitchen nun, Sister Cecily, is waiting, arms folded, brow arched like a question mark. She signs, "You're late." You sign back, "I brought the good turnips." She narrows her eyes at the basket, then shrugs. Close enough. Inside the kitchen is a miniature world of heat and clatter. Steam fogs the windows, and spoons clink gently against clay pots. Bread dough rises in bowls covered with damp cloths, and you can smell something garlicky simmering over the fire. It's the kind of scent that makes even the vow of fasting feel a little negotiable. Sister Cecily doesn't speak much, but she has a magnificent way of sighing that communicates everything from disapproval to delight. Today, she teaches you how to shape dough into the little spirals that the abbey bakes only for feast days. The dough is sticky and uncooperative. Yours look like confused slugs. Hers are perfect, as always. She signs, "Yours have personality." You raise an eyebrow. "Thank you?" Meal prep is rhythmic, soothing. You chop herbs, crush garlic, stir thick bean paste. The sign language you've learned here isn't just for prayer or instruction. It's for moments like this, when words would only get in the way of the flow. A novice passes through with a request. The visiting friar would like more honey. Cecily signs, "Tell him he's not a bee." You both laugh, the silent kind of laugh that shakes your shoulders but makes no noise. You take the honey anyway. As you walk the pot back to the guest house, you pass a row of cloister arches. Rain beads on the stone. It reminds you of stories from your early days in the convent, the whispered legend that the arches could hear your thoughts if you touched them on a rainy day. You were told not to believe it, of course. But here you are, palm grazing the slick stone, wondering what it might say back. The friar thanks you with a nod. No attempt at sign language this time. You set the honey down beside his bed and gently mime, "Small spoon," because last time he poured it in like soup. He smiles sheepishly. Back in the scriptorium, work continues in near silence. Quills scratch, pages turn, and occasionally a sharp tisk when ink is spilled on a nearly finished illumination. You help clean up the mess. A depiction of St. Bridget now looks like she's crying black tears. Maybe it's fitting. You sign to Sister Juliana, the oldest of the scribes. "Do we start over?" She signs back, "No. Saints are allowed to cry." It's strange how much can be said without saying anything. You've heard that some monks believe language is a barrier between the soul and God, that to speak is to narrow the mystery. But here, in this hush of signs and scribbles, it doesn't feel narrow. It feels like a sea, quiet, vast, and always moving beneath the surface. Historians still debate how widespread these sign systems really were. Some argue they were invented independently in each abbey, tailored to daily life. Others think there was a shared root, perhaps a lost monastic code passed from one region to another like contraband. A few claim the sign languages were more elaborate than we'll ever know, and that most were never written down. But you don't need parchment to know the truth of a gesture. You live it. Evening falls again. You walk beneath the eaves as rain finally stops, and the gutters drip like ticking clocks. In the garden, the herbs shine wet and dark, heavy with scent. A few novices are laughing at something. No words, just rapid hand motions, and you catch the gist. Something about a mouse in Sister Cecily's apron. You don't ask if it's true. Better to let that story ferment a while. Mice have a way of becoming dragons in abbey lore. That night, after Compline, you kneel beside your cot and trace the signs for gratitude, peace, and sleep. Your fingers linger on the last one, curling slowly like a leaf folding in on itself. You don't need to speak. You never did. The abbey is quiet now. The kind of quiet that feels like an exhale, a settling. Somewhere a bell hangs in still air, waiting for morning. Your hands rest on your blanket, motionless. But inside, they remember everything. The silent jokes, the sweet girl's apple, the way Sister Juliana's eyes crinkled when you used the wrong sign for ointment and accidentally said, ferret. The way Eloise never once needed to raise her voice because her hands were enough. The way silence became your language, your refuge, your song. You wake before the bell. There's a thin ribbon of blue stretching across the horizon. The kind of quiet just before the birds remember they have songs. The cot creaks as you sit up, wrap your shawl around your shoulders, and stretch out fingers that still remember the shape of yesterday's signs. They feel like small stories, paused but not forgotten. Your feet find the cold floor. You don't light a candle. There's no need. You know this abbey like a second skin now. Every uneven flagstone, every squeaky hinge, every breath of incense clinging to the old wooden beams. In the dormitory, the other sisters still sleep. One turns in her cot and mumbles something indistinct. Another snores faintly, an impressive feat given the vow of silence. You smile, pull on your shoes, and tiptoe past them, hands tucked into your sleeves. At the end of the hall is the little chapel where Sister Eloise sometimes prays alone before dawn. Today she isn't there, but the waxy scent of old candles and dried rosemary lingers like her echo. You take a seat in the third pew where the wood is smoothest from years of morning knees. You don't speak. You pray with your fingers. They move slowly, deliberately. Gratitude, hope, forgiveness, and something like joy, but softer, something untranslatable. Scholars still argue whether this secret sign language was ever truly meant to be hidden. Some believe the nuns used it only when necessary, during meals or liturgy. Others suspect it became a fuller, richer form of expression than spoken Latin ever could be. There's little hard evidence either way. But the gestures linger in old marginalia, strange sketches in manuscripts, and rare footnotes from confused male visitors. One friar famously wrote, "They speak with their hands and stare with calm menace. I felt judged for my soup slurping." You wonder what he'd think now of your silent chapel and the dozens of stories being told with a single nod, a crooked finger, or a closed fist. After prayers, you head to the washroom. Cold water in a basin, a linen cloth. The shock of it wakes you better than any bell. You remember the old sign for goosebumps, which is, amusingly, just a rapid fluttering of the fingers down your arms, like a flurry of scared ants. Breakfast is simple. Porridge again. A bit of dried pear tucked in today, though, and someone's managed to warm the bread without burning it this time. Small miracles. Across the table, Sister Cecily signs, "I saved you the crusty end." You sign back, "Saints be praised." A novice beside you fumbles her spoon, then signs "oops," using the movement usually reserved for blessings. You both break into silent giggles. Cecily glares over the rim of her bowl, but she's biting back a grin. The day continues in patterns. Weaving in the workroom, letters in the scriptorium, a lesson in herbal remedies that mostly consists of, "Don't touch that, you'll hallucinate for 3 days." The sun arcs overhead, sparrows chatter in the eaves, laundry flaps lazily in the wind, and your hands never stop moving. And as they do, threading, mixing, pouring, pointing, you realize something. This language that you once thought was only for obedience or correction. It's become more. It's become poetry. A flutter of fingers becomes a laugh. A twist of the wrist says, "Let me help." 2 palms pressed together means, "I'm sorry." And a single held-up finger says, "Wait, you have a crumb on your chin." There is grace in these signs. Wit, warmth, 1,000 little nuances that no Latin scroll could capture. By now, you're fluent. Not just in the gestures, but in the stillness that follows them, the pauses, the silences between silences. Even at night, as the stars begin to blink overhead and the abbey sinks into the breathy hush of sleep, you find yourself signing thoughts to the dark. Little nothings, gratitudes, dreams. There's a finality to the day that doesn't feel heavy, just settled. You tuck into your cot once more, pull the blanket high, close your eyes, but your hands remain for a moment above the sheet, performing one last small phrase. Good night. No one sees it. No one needs to. And now, you rest. The night has fully wrapped itself around the abbey like a soft wool cloak. The moon hangs high above the old stone roof, catching gently in the leaded windows and leaving puddles of silver on the worn flagstones. The silence, always present, now deepens. Even the wind seems to hush itself out of respect for the stillness within. You lie in your cot, body quiet, thoughts slow. The linen smells faintly of lavender and the faintest trace of wood smoke. There's no need to move, no need to think, no more tasks to tend to. You've spoken your last words, not aloud, but in the soft curl of your fingers. And that's enough. The world beyond the abbey, its noise, its worries, its rushing and ruckus, feels distant now, like a dream someone else once had. You are here instead, anchored in the present, in the hush of stone walls and candle wax, and the invisible thread connecting every sister, every soul. Breath in, long and slow, breath out, even slower. The rhythm of rest. Let the day dissolve, memory by memory, into the calm waters of sleep. Let your limbs grow heavy and your thoughts light. Let the quiet be a comfort. In the morning, the bells will call again, and your hands will rise to greet them, not with sound, but with all the soft wisdom they've carried for centuries. But for now, there's only this moment. Stillness, warmth, sleep.